Hi, this is Cindy from Part-Time Permies, and it is July 1st, so I'll give you a quick July garden update. We still have a good patch of ragweed that we could turn into mulch, and our oil seed pumpkins are growing well. My chicken planted sunflower is now taller than me. So I have a feeling this one's gonna be pretty darn big. And is it heading yet? I can't even see it. This is our tomato asparagus bed. Actually, it's mainly an asparagus bed. I just put our extra tomato plants in here, and they're doing well. So is the asparagus. So we didn't harvest the asparagus this year because this was the first year we planted it, and it's doing well. Our strawberries are just about done. These are wild strawberries. Ah, look, got a little one. Yeah, so might get a little more, but not much. I love wild strawberries. Much more tart, much more flavor to each berry, even though they're tiny. So those are my transplanted wild strawberries. Over here, these are snap peas, outgrowing our trellis. This is the taller of the trellises. So this other bed, the mammoth snow peas from M.I. Gardener have completely outgrown our trellis and are now growing back up themselves. So I guess we need bigger trellises for these guys. The Johnny, those are shelling peas right there, only got about a couple feet tall at tallest. So they are fine in this trellis. In fact, it's too tall for them. So what an amazing difference between the different varieties and the different places it came from. Cabbage, we've had some cabbage worms on. The funny thing is this one was the first one with cabbage worms, and it's bouncing back like crazy. That one has gotten quite a bit, but some of these others hardly gotten eaten at all. So we'll get some cabbage out of that. We have a random potato in our brassica bed. Our cucumbers are coming up along this row, and you can see them along that row. So what we do also need to do is put our trellis here, which the plan is to put hoops, hoops that we already made, and then put fencing over the hoops so the cucumbers can climb over that fencing. Our Hubbard Squash is going nuts, so I think we'll outgrow the weeds here in a minute, in a few weeks. But probably should chop and drop some of that ragweed in the meantime. Summer squash is doing extremely well. The funny thing is, okay, this bed over here, these are three sisters beds, although I have all three sisters in this bed. This bed was not a bed last year, it was grass last year. So it hasn't had that soil built up. But on the other half over here, that was in our garden for the last 2 years, and we've been building up all this leaf mulch. So I don't know if you can see the difference there, but the corn over here is actually waist high. Over here, the taller ones might be knee high. So knee high by July, maybe definitely past knee high over here. Another difference with the corn I wanted to show you. If we look down here at the base, they're actually developing these side shoots. If I could get in here and show. Got these side shoots coming off the corn, which we're gonna leave. That's actually indication that we have good nitrogen in the soil here, which again, this is the area that we've been using and building up for a few years, so that's good to see. Each one of these side shoots will grow a stalk and may actually form an ear of corn on it as well. So these are planted tight, but they are enjoying it. They are actually doing very well. Those side shoots are a good indication of that. Whereas The ones over here are planted just as tight, but there's not so much of that side shoot growth. But that, again, probably has to do with these being in not as built up soil here. It's going to take a couple years to build it up to the same level. We do have some pole beans in here that have outgrown my stakes. That are, got these nice flowers on them. Okay, this mess in here has some pumpkins that are flagging a little bit. It's been so hot, and a lot of beans. A lot of beans in this plant, in this bed. You got some volunteer pollinator plants. I'll leave that. That is in our path, but that is a butterfly weed. We have harvested our scapes for the first time this week. I left a few on here to develop into flowers and get those little bobulas to drop. I do over here need to save this lavender plant that's being outgrown by both potato and spearmint. So I'll have to do something about that. But the volunteer potatoes from last year that I missed are doing really well. And this lavender plant is doing very well. This is a mustard green that we have developed from last year's seed. So it's doing well. It looks like I'm getting a tomato here, which is nice to see because I actually put some of Rose from Wholesome Roots. I put some of her heirloom tomato seeds, direct seed, in here. So I think that's growing up from hers. Either that or it's a Roma, because I did put some Romas in here last fall. So just a volunteer start. And so we do have a tomato growing amongst our thyme. We have a mess of brassicas, ragweed, sunflowers, and other flowers that are in my path here, which I have not cut down because we don't have many flowers in the garden, and I kind of like to have these flowers. Those are watermelons growing. A little bit of yellow on there, so we've been very hot and wet. So I'm hoping we're not going to get too much molds and blights. But we haven't staked any of our tomatoes over here yet. In fact, last year the tomatoes that we didn't stake produced the most tomatoes. So I might stake these a little bit just to keep them from spreading out too much, because we also have some peppers in these areas and things. I want to make sure I keep a little room for the peppers to grow. Back here, Mike did a scattering of a variety of flowers, and it looks like primarily one type is coming up, and it looks like it's a little bit thick. So I might try to pull some of these and maybe transplant them in other areas and see if it works. Thin this side out a little bit. But we also have some volunteer tomatillos. Those we have randomly all over the garden, so we didn't plant any tomatillos this year. So this plant right here is a volunteer, which is nice to see. We have more beans here, and then next to some melons. So a variety of melons we have here. We have some melons here and some back there. And these are volunteers borage. We planted borage last year, and we have some random plants coming up. This is not where I planted it last year, so this must have been, spread by seed, which is fine with me. We have melons growing in amongst this area. We can probably chop and drop some of this grass, use it for mulch, which would be good. I do kind of like these little purple flowers though. Not planted. I forget what type they are. Those are brassica flowers, which I didn't plant any brassica here, but fine with me. So I'll show you more fully established borage. And this one is actually closer to where we planted the borage last year. So this plant is lovely. It's fallen over a little bit, could be staked. But it's got some nice flowers developing. You can eat those flowers, you can eat the young leaves. The young leaves do have a lot of hairs on them, so a lot of people will cook them down, but of course they cook down quite a bit. Some people, when they're young and tender, will eat the stems as well. Peel them and eat those. So a lot of edible parts to this. Now some people argue that has some of the same components as comfrey, which can affect people, but it actually has those in much lower amounts than comfrey does. So I know more people who'll eat borage than comfrey, but everyone's a little different on what they consider safe. Planted potatoes here as well, which are coming up right along the border, along with the comfrey, or along with the borage. So potatoes and borage coming up through here. We planted the potatoes with my niece, so you can see that video. They're doing very well. And we got some very large tomato plants and beans. Apparently these are climbing beans, which I didn't think they were, but they seem to be climbing my tomatoes. I might have to put some stakes in here to help them keep from weighing down my tomatoes. Beans everywhere, mainly to build up the nitrogen in our soil. So our first broccoli head is growing on our broccoli plant. Again, this one was attacked by cabbage worms as well, but it's bounced back quite a bit. So I'm hoping we'll get a head there. And this one over here, I think is actually cauliflower. Got more potatoes over here. And we got potatoes going into flower. And then some garlic over here. This garlic isn't doing as well as the garlic in the hugel bed, so I might just keep it going in the hugel bed. But we'll be pulling this garlic here soon. This was the compost pile. Got a bunch of chicken compost, a lot of other stuff. That sunflower is almost 6 feet tall. The top of this run is 6 feet. And look at all this ragweed. We also have, look at that squash. It's huge. That's like over 3 feet tall there. And then it's growing up the side and ran into the top corner. But that's all out of compost. I can actually chop and drop a lot of this and just add it straight to this compost or mulch with it. We got sunflowers, we got ragweed, we got lamb's quarters, we got squash. Lots growing in here. On accident, all volunteer. And another thing I'm going to start picking and drying out are these yarrow flowers. I'm gonna pick, cut them down low, dry them out, and that way you can use the leaves and the flowers in tea. They are used medicinally, and I'll link my webpage below, which has the herb of the week, because we did that in the winter. We did yarrow as a herb of the week in the winter.